1 week before Christmas, I stood in the shadows of my own parents' hallway, listening to them plan my holiday sentence. My sister-in-law laughed about bringing extra champagne because I would be there to do the cooking, cleaning, and babysitting. My mother agreed, saying I needed to make myself useful since I had no family of my own. I did not storm into the kitchen. I did not scream or cry. I simply walked back to my car and quietly booked a luxury vacation for one. By Christmas Eve, my mother would be screaming through the phone, demanding to know why I abandoned them. I laughed and told her not to wait up. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic relatives who took advantage of your kindness. My name is Naomi, and I am 32 years old. Growing up in a respectable, church-going African-American family in Atlanta, there was an unspoken rule that you protect the family image at all costs. You smile in the pews, you wear your Sunday best, and never let outsiders know your business. But that grace only seemed to extend to my older brother Marcus. As I stood in the darkened hallway of my childhood home, the illusion of our happy family shattered completely. I had come over unannounced to drop off some early Christmas gifts. I was just about to step into the kitchen when I heard her voice. Chelsea, Marcus' wife. She was pouring herself a glass of my mother's expensive wine, laughing that high-pitched, forced laugh she used whenever she was getting her way. She had perfected the art of weaponizing her fragility. I am definitely bringing at least 3 bottles of that vintage champagne to the Aspen cabin next week, Chelsea said. Marcus and I desperately need a break from the city. It will be so nice to hit the slopes all day and just relax without the kids screaming in our ears. I held my breath, pressing my back against the cool hallway wall. Who is going to watch the twins and the baby if you two are skiing all day? I heard my mother Patricia ask. Her tone was not concerned. It was conversational, as if the answer was already a foregone conclusion. Oh, Naomi, of course, Chelsea replied without missing a beat. I mean, she is single. She does not have any kids of her own, and she works some little customer service job. Plus, it is family tradition. She loves taking care of the kids while we actually enjoy the holiday. She can handle the cooking and cleaning too. It will give her a purpose. The audacity of her words made my blood run cold. Some little customer service job. I was a luxury travel concierge. I managed multi-million-dollar vacation accounts for the global elite. I booked private jets and coordinated logistics for people who owned sports teams. But to Chelsea and my family, I was just the unmarried black daughter whose time held absolutely zero value. I waited for my mother to defend me. I waited for Patricia, the woman who always preached about respect, to tell her privileged daughter-in-law that I was not their unpaid domestic servant. I waited for her to say I deserved vacation too. Instead, my mother sighed in total agreement. You are absolutely right, Chelsea, my mother said, the clinking of glasses echoing in the warm kitchen. Naomi needs to make herself useful. She spends far too much time alone anyway. It is her duty to step up for this family. God knows she is not bringing a husband to the table anytime soon. After all, Marcus works so hard in finance to provide for you all. I closed my eyes as bitter realization washed over me. Marcus was not providing for anyone. He was drowning in gambling debts. I knew this because I had seen the collection notices. He was a fraud, playing a wealthy finance bro while his wife paraded around playing the exhausted upper-class mother. And my parents bought into it completely, treating him like absolute royalty while treating me like an afterthought. They were blinded by their obsession. They thought I existed solely to absorb their burdens. Chelsea continued complaining about how hard it was to be a mother, demanding that my parents ensure I had the right organic snacks stocked for her children before they arrived. She even suggested I should sleep on the pull-out couch in the damp basement so her kids could have the larger guest rooms. My mother readily agreed, promising to text me a grocery list immediately. I looked down at the carefully wrapped gifts in my hands. The disrespect was not a simple misunderstanding. It was deeply calculated and entirely expected. They genuinely believed my life was so empty, so devoid of value, that I would gladly spend my holidays serving them in a cabin that they did not even know the truth about at all. The cabin in Aspen was their pride and joy, their ultimate status symbol that they bragged about to everyone at church. What they did not know was that it was also my ultimate secret, a secret that was about to change the power dynamic forever. I turned around silently, clutching the gifts against my chest, and walked right back out the front door. The crisp winter air hit my face as I stepped onto the porch, waking me up to a harsh reality I had ignored for far too long. I got into my car and sat in the driver's seat, listening to the quiet hum of the engine. I was done being the sacrificial lamb for the sake of their fake family harmony. I pulled out my phone to make a plan. This was just the beginning. The cold steering wheel grounded me as I stared at the front window of my parents' house. The warm light spilling onto the porch felt like a mockery of the coldness inside. For years I had played the dutiful daughter, swallowing my pride to maintain the fragile peace of our family. I had let them diminish my career to a customer service job, when in reality, I was orchestrating multi-million-dollar itineraries for people who owned the very buildings Marcus pretended to have offices in. I started the engine, but I did not drive away immediately. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and opened my secure banking app. The balance staring back at me was a number Patricia and Leon could not even fathom. It was the physical proof of my invisible success. I shifted into drive and headed back to my own condo downtown, leaving their delusional reality in my rearview mirror. By the time I walked into my living room, the initial sting of Chelsea and my mother's conversation had hardened into a cold, calculated resolve. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and opened my laptop. I did not shed a single tear. Tears were for people who felt powerless, and I was holding all the cards. My business was built on curating the most exclusive experiences in the world, and Aspen was my playground. I knew every five-star general manager, every private chef, and every hidden luxury estate in the Rocky Mountains. I bypassed the standard booking sites and logged directly into my private concierge portal for the St. Regis Aspen Resort. I navigated to their peak holiday availability. It was the height of the season, and the resort was completely sold out to the public. But my profile carried a heavy weight. I selected the premier penthouse suite offering panoramic views of the mountain, a private outdoor hot tub, and a dedicated 24-hour butler service. The rate was $15,000 a night. I did not even blink. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my American Express Centurion card, the heavy black titanium catching the ambient light of my living room. I typed in the numbers and secured the reservation for 7 nights. I was going to Aspen just as my family expected, but my holiday would look nothing like the indentured servitude they had planned for me. My penthouse was exactly 10 miles away from the rustic cabin they were about to occupy. 10 miles and an entire universe of luxury apart. Just as the confirmation email hit my inbox, my phone screen lit up with a rapid succession of text messages. I picked it up and saw my mother's name flashing. Patricia was already laying the groundwork for her unpaid holiday staff. I opened the thread and read the demands scrolling down my screen. Naomi, your brother and Chelsea are bringing the baby, so we need to make sure the cabin is spotless before they get there. I need you to drive up early on Thursday morning. The heating system is old, so turn it on as soon as you arrive and make sure the bedrooms are warm. Oh, and Chelsea wants that specific Wagyu beef for Christmas Eve dinner. You need to pick up 3 pounds of it from the specialty butcher downtown before you leave. Do not forget to grab 3 large boxes of hypoallergenic diapers for the twins and the baby. The expensive ones Chelsea does not like the store brand. I read the text message 3 times. Not a single please. Not a single thank you. There was no inquiry about my work schedule or whether taking a Thursday off would impact my income. In my mother's eyes, my time was entirely disposable. I was simply a resource to be utilized to make her golden child's life easier. She was casually ordering me to spend thousands of dollars of my own money on premium beef and diapers for children that were not mine, all while expecting me to act as the advance cleaning crew for a cabin she thought my father proudly owned. The irony was staggering. If only Patricia knew that the cabin she was sending me to clean had been seized by the IRS 3 years ago because Leon had hidden his income to maintain his country club lifestyle. I had purchased that property at a quiet auction through an anonymous LLC just to ensure my parents would not face the public humiliation of a foreclosure. I had been paying the property taxes and the maintenance fees ever since, letting them pretend it was still theirs. They were treating their landlord like the hired help. Another text chimed in. And make sure you get the good champagne, Naomi. Marcus has had a stressful quarter at work. We want this to be perfect for him. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the kind of smile that comes when you fully realize the absolute power of your position. I did not type out a paragraph defending myself. I did not point out the blatant favoritism or remind her that I was a grown woman running a highly lucrative business. Explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you is a waste of breath. Action was the only language they would comprehend. I tapped the text box. I looked at the long list of absurd, arrogant demands meant to chain me to a hot stove and a pile of dirty diapers while they skied and drank the days away. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed 4 simple letters and hit send. Okay. That was it. 1 word. It was the verbal equivalent of pulling the pin on a grenade and gently rolling it across the floor. I tossed my phone onto the sofa and took a slow sip of my wine. The trap was officially set. They were expecting a compliant, exhausted sister and daughter to cater to their every whim in the freezing mountains. Instead, they were going to walk into a dark, empty cabin with no heat, no food, and no free labor. And I would be watching the entire implosion from the heated balcony of a $15,000 a night penthouse. I closed my laptop, feeling a profound sense of peace. The era of the sacrificial daughter was over. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear over the city. I did not wake up at 4 a.m. to load a rental vehicle with cases of expensive diapers and premium steaks. I did not spend my morning stressing over whether the organic snacks were the exact brand my sister-in-law demanded. I woke up at 7, in my silk sheets, casually packing a single designer suitcase with cashmere sweaters and high-end ski wear. A black car waited downstairs to take me to the airport. Bypassing the chaotic holiday security lines, I was escorted directly to the private first-class lounge. The contrast between the grueling manual labor my family envisioned for me and my actual reality was almost poetic. By the time I boarded the flight and settled into my oversized leather seat, a flight attendant named Sarah was already handing me a chilled mimosa in a crystal flute. I took a slow sip, letting the citrus and champagne wash over my tongue. I watched the clouds part as the plane leveled out toward the majestic Rocky Mountains. For the first time in 32 years, my chest felt entirely light. I kept my phone on airplane mode for the entire duration of the flight. I knew exactly what was happening on the ground without needing to look at a screen. Marcus and Chelsea would have packed their 3 kids into their leased luxury vehicle, complaining the entire drive about the holiday traffic and the inconvenience of parenting. Patricia and Leon would be following in their own car, bragging over the phone to their church friends about their magnificent Aspen retreat. They expected to pull up to a glowing cabin with a roaring fire, the smell of roasting garlic and seasoned beef wafting from the kitchen, and me standing at the door, ready to unpack their bags like a dutiful servant. I could picture the exact moment they pulled into the snow-covered driveway. I visualized Marcus swaggering up to the front door, punching in the old access code that I had completely disabled the night before. I pictured the red error light blinking back at him, that initial confusion morphing into irritation and then rapidly escalating into full-blown entitled rage. As the plane began its descent into the Aspen airport, I finally connected my phone to the cellular network. It took less than 10 seconds for the device to practically vibrate out of my hand. The notifications flooded the screen in a rapid, unbroken stream of pure chaos. 15 missed calls, 12 from Patricia, 2 from Marcus, and 1 from Leon. The text messages were a cascading waterfall of rising panic and absolute arrogance. I opened the family group chat and scrolled to the top, taking my time to read every single word. The first message was from my mother, sent 2 hours ago. "Naomi, we are 10 minutes away. I hope the driveway is shoveled and the groceries are put away." 30 minutes later, the tone shifted drastically. "Naomi, where are you? The keypad is blinking red and the door will not open. Pick up your phone right now." 10 minutes after that, Marcus chimed in using his typical aggressive tone. "Open the door, Naomi. Chelsea is freezing and the baby is crying. Stop playing games and do your job." By the time the final messages rolled in, panic had fully set in. My father demanded an immediate response, declaring his absolute authority over a house he did not even legally own. I ignored the texts and tapped on the voicemail icon. My mother had left a frantic 2-minute message. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear as the plane wheels touched down on the icy tarmac. Patricia was screaming over the sound of howling wind and crying children. "Naomi, what is wrong with you?" she shrieked, her pristine church lady composure completely obliterated by the harsh winter elements. "We are standing on the porch and we are freezing to death out here. The code is not working." I checked the smart thermostat app and it says the heat is completely shut off inside the house. Where is the food? Where are the diapers? Your brother is furious, and Chelsea is threatening to take the kids to a hotel we cannot afford. You ruined Christmas before it even started. Answer your phone right now. I listened to the background noise of the voicemail. I could hear Chelsea whining loudly about her expensive boots getting ruined in the snow. I could hear Marcus cursing at the keypad and slamming his fist against the solid oak front door. The heavy oak door that I had paid for with my own money after buying the property at a foreclosure auction. Leon was yelling at Patricia to call me again, demanding respect from a daughter he only valued when she was serving him. They were locked out in the freezing cold, standing on my property demanding entry to a home they lost 3 years ago due to their own financial recklessness. I let the voicemail play out to the very end, soaking in the chaotic symphony of their entitlement crashing into a solid brick wall. I locked my phone screen and finished the last drop of my mimosa as the plane taxied to the private terminal. I gathered my designer coat and stepped out into the crisp mountain air. The trap was completely sprung, and they had walked right into it. 2 hours later, the harsh Colorado wind was nothing but a rumor outside the frosted glass windows of the Remedy Spa inside the St. Regis. I lay face down on a heated massage table, breathing in the intoxicating scent of lavender and eucalyptus. The massage therapist had just placed the first smooth, hot basalt stone onto the tense muscles between my shoulder blades when my phone shattered the serene silence. It buzzed aggressively against the marble counter. I reached out a languid arm, tapped the speaker button, and let the phone drop back onto the marble. "Naomi Marie, what in the name of God is wrong with you?" Patricia's voice blasted through the high-fidelity speaker, echoing against the spa walls. The wind howled in the background of the call, a violent soundtrack to my mother's absolute hysteria. "We have been sitting in the driveway for over an hour. The new access code you sent is a fake. The door will not budge. The thermostat app says it is 40 degrees inside that house. Where are you?" I closed my eyes as the massage therapist pressed another hot stone into my lower back. I let out a soft sigh of contentment before directing my voice toward the phone. I'm getting a hot stone massage, Mother. The eucalyptus oil is doing wonders for my skin. You should really look into booking a session. The line went dead silent for 2 full seconds. I could almost see the gears grinding in my mother's head as her brain failed to process a reality where I was not at her beck and call. A spa. Patricia shrieked, the sheer volume causing the audio to distort. A spa! We are standing in a blizzard, Naomi. Your brother is kicking the door. Chelsea is crying. The babies are freezing. You were supposed to be here yesterday to turn on the heat and stock the fridge. Get in your car right now and come unlock this door. I think you should call a locksmith, I said, my voice dropping to a smooth conversational volume. I am sure there is an emergency service in town that can drill the lock for you. It might cost you $500 or $600 given the holiday rush, but Marcus makes so much money in finance, that should be pocket change for him, right? Are you out of your mind? Patricia yelled. I am not paying a locksmith when you have the code. Give me the code immediately. Before I could respond, the sound of a scuffle echoed through the speaker. Someone had aggressively snatched the phone away from my mother. The heavy breathing of my sister-in-law filled the audio feed. Chelsea had arrived at the microphone, and she brought her favorite weapon. Her tears. Naomi, how could you do this to us? Chelsea wailed, her voice trembling with forced devastation. She weaponized her crying with the precision of a seasoned sniper. It was the exact pitch she used whenever she maxed out Marcus's credit cards and needed Patricia to pay the mortgage. How can you be so cruel? The twins are shivering. The baby's lips are turning blue. You are literally committing child abuse by leaving us out here in the snow. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and manipulative. For years, that specific brand of hysteria had ruled our family. Chelsea would cry, and my parents would immediately bend over backward to placate her, terrified of looking like the angry black-in-laws. They treated her tears like holy water and expected me to act as the mop to clean up her messes. But I was not playing my assigned role today. Child abuse is a very strong accusation, Chelsea, I replied, resting my chin on my folded arms. But let us be extremely clear about the facts. I did not birth those 3 children. I am not their legal guardian. I am not the one who dragged them up a mountain in a snowstorm without checking if the accommodations were actually secure. You are their mother. If your children are turning blue in the snow, that is a profound failure of your own parenting. Do not project your maternal incompetence onto me. Chelsea let out a loud, dramatic gasp. The sound of her faux hyperventilating increased. How can you say that? We are family. We are supposed to be spending Christmas together. We have absolutely nothing to eat and no way to get warm. You are a monster, Naomi. A bitter, jealous monster who hates me because I have a husband and a beautiful family while you have no one. I let her finish her tantrum. I let the silence stretch, ensuring she felt the full weight of her own pathetic performance. It is funny you mention having nothing to eat or drink, I said, keeping my tone perfectly measured. Because I distinctly remember hearing you tell my mother that you were bringing 3 bottles of vintage champagne for this trip. You specifically said you and Marcus were going to drink and ski while I played your unpaid nanny. So here is my advice to you, Chelsea. Pop the cork on that champagne. Drink it fast. The alcohol should provide a nice false sense of warmth while you wait for that locksmith. You malicious witch! Chelsea sobbed, her voice cracking as the reality of the situation breached her entitlement. I am calling the police. I am telling them you locked us out of our own property. Feel free, I countered, but you might want to ask Leon about the actual ownership of that cabin before you invite law enforcement to run the property records. You might find the results incredibly embarrassing. What are you talking about, Naomi? Patricia yelled, having clearly leaned in close to hear the exchange. What do you mean, ownership? My massage therapist applied firm pressure to my shoulders, melting away the tension. I mean exactly what I said, I replied. Now, if you will excuse me, my massage is only half over, and I have a reservation at the chef's table in an hour. Have a wonderful afternoon standing on the porch. I did not wait for the inevitable explosion of rage. I reached out and tapped the red button disconnecting the call. The silence that filled the spa room was pure, unadulterated bliss. I knew the peace would not last long. Chelsea would currently be throwing the mother of all tantrums in the snow, demanding that my parents fix the situation immediately. She would turn on Marcus, blaming him for his useless sister. And then the true patriarchal authority of the family would feel compelled to step in. Leon would demand obedience. He would try to flex muscles he no longer possessed. I closed my eyes and let the heat of the stones sink into my muscles, waiting for the next phone call. I did not have to wait long. Less than 3 minutes after I ended the conversation with Chelsea, my phone began to vibrate against the marble countertop again. The caller ID flashed with my father's name. Leon was a man who demanded absolute obedience from his congregation at church and total submission from his family at home. He used his deep, booming baritone to command rooms and intimidate anyone who dared to question his authority. My massage therapist paused, her hands hovering above my back, sensing the rising tension. I gave her a reassuring nod and tapped the screen to accept the call without lifting my head from the cushioned face cradle. Naomi Marie, you will listen to me, and you will listen to me right now, my father roared. His voice was so loud it rattled the small speaker on the marble counter. You do not hang up on your sister-in-law, and you certainly do not speak to your mother with that kind of disrespect. I am the head of this family, and I am the owner of this cabin. I command you to get in your car, drive up this mountain, and unlock this door immediately. Do you hear me? I let his booming voice bounce off the serene tiled walls of my private spa suite. For my entire life, that exact tone had struck fear into my heart. It was the voice that told me my hospitality business was useless compared to Marcus getting a junior position at a bank. It was the voice that demanded I hand over my hard-earned savings to help pay for Marcus and Chelsea's extravagant wedding because family helps family. But today, that voice held absolutely no power over me. Are you finished yelling, Leon? I asked, keeping my voice perfectly flat. I stopped calling him Dad 3 years ago, right around the time I found out about his little tax evasion problem. Do not you dare take that tone with me, he bellowed. You are acting like a spoiled child. We invited you on this luxury vacation out of the goodness of our hearts. We gave you the opportunity to spend Christmas in $1 million Aspen estate, and you repay us by throwing a tantrum because you have to do a few simple chores? Marcus is a highly successful financial executive. He needs this rest. Your mother needs this rest. You have 0 responsibilities and 0 dependents. You will get here right now and do your duty to this family. I shifted slightly on the heated massage table, instructing my therapist to focus on my lower back. The absolute delusion of his statement was breathtaking. He truly believed he was the benevolent patriarch bestowing a gift upon his pathetic spinster daughter. He had spent his entire adult life projecting the image of a wealthy real estate investor and community pillar. He wore tailored suits, drove a leased Mercedes, and sat in the front pew every Sunday. But his entire life was a house of cards, built on maxed-out credit lines and unpaid property taxes. If you do not get here in the next 20 minutes, I will personally ensure you never set foot in this cabin again, my father threatened. His voice dripped with the arrogant certainty of a man who thought he held all the wealth and all the power. I will cut you out of the holiday entirely. You will spend Christmas alone in your empty apartment while we enjoy my property. I am giving you one last chance to be a part of this family, Naomi. I reached for my phone and navigated away from the call screen. I opened my banking folder and tapped on the utility management app for the Aspen property. The screen loaded, displaying the real-time energy usage of the cabin. I could see the central heating system struggling against the Colorado blizzard, drawing massive amounts of electricity to keep the pipes from freezing. You know what is fascinating about homeownership, Leon? I said softly, watching the green activity bars on my screen. It comes with a lot of hidden responsibilities: property taxes, routine maintenance, utility bills. It takes a very organized, financially responsible person to keep a property like that running smoothly. Someone who actually pays their bills on time without fail.
What kind of nonsense are you babbling about? He snapped. I pay my bills. I am a respected man in my community. You are a disrespectful, ungrateful girl.
I smiled. My thumb hovered over the active account status. I tapped the settings gear icon. I scrolled down through the menu to the billing preferences. My index finger rested directly over the bright red button labeled Cancel Service. Since you are the proud owner of that beautiful cabin, Leon, you should not need my help with anything, I replied smoothly. In fact, you should probably handle the utility accounts yourself. It is the responsible thing to do. For the head of the family, I pressed the red button. A confirmation prompt popped up on the screen, asking if I was sure I wanted to terminate service immediately. I tapped yes. On the phone, I heard a sudden sharp click, followed by a collective gasp from the background. The low hum of the outdoor security lights, which had been illuminating the snowy porch, abruptly died. The faint mechanical sound of the indoor air handler grinding to a complete halt echoed through the receiver. "What just happened?" Marcus yelled in the distance. "Why did the porch lights go out?" Chelsea started whining loudly about the cold again. I stretched my arms out, letting the massage therapist wrap my shoulders in warm, damp towels. "Oh dear," I said, feigning mild concern. "It looks like the power just went out." That is the thing about those luxury Aspen cabins, Leon. The local utility companies are very strict about receiving their payments. If someone fails to pay their bills or relies on someone else to cover their tracks, the company just shuts everything down, even in the middle of a blizzard.
Naomi, what did you do?
My father demanded, but the booming authority had vanished from his voice entirely. It was replaced by a thin, reedy sliver of panic. The sudden darkness had stripped away his bravado, leaving only fear. "Did you mess with my power grid?" "I cannot mess with what is not mine," I replied, playing his own game against him. "You said it yourself, Leon. It is your cabin. You are the wealthy patriarch. I am sure a man of your immense financial standing can simply call the electric company and clear up this little misunderstanding. They usually require the primary account holder to verify their identity and provide a valid credit card. You do have a valid credit card, right? One that is not maxed out or currently sitting in collections?" The silence on the line was deafening. My father knew his cards were declining all over town. He knew he could not pass a basic credit check to save his life. He was standing in the freezing dark with his golden child son and his crying daughter-in-law utterly powerless. "Call them, Leon," I challenged, my voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "Call the utility company and tell them you are the owner. Tell them to turn the heat back on. Let us see what they say." I ended the call and tossed the phone aside, onto the plush spa towel. The heavy silence of the treatment room returned, but the real entertainment was just beginning. I tipped my massage therapist generously and made my way back to my penthouse to change for dinner. I slipped into a sleek emerald green evening gown paired with understated diamond studs. The reflection in the mirror showed a woman completely unbothered by the chaos unfolding 10 miles away down a freezing mountain road. I took the elevator down to the resort Michelin star. The host greeted me by name and escorted me to the best table in the house, situated right beside a roaring stone fireplace. The atmosphere was a symphony of clinking crystal and extreme wealth. I ordered a glass of vintage Bordeaux and the chef's signature dish, featuring generous shavings of white Alba truffles. Every bite was an absolute celebration of the independence I had fought so hard to build. while my family blindly worshipped my brother.
When the waiter brought out the fresh truffles to shave over my plate, I picked up my phone. The lighting from the fireplace cast a perfect warm glow across my face. I held my glass of wine up, framing the shot to include the decadent meal, the roaring fire, and my own relaxed smile. It was a picture of pure luxury. I opened my social media app and uploaded the photo. I did not write a long paragraph explaining myself or defending my actions. I did not mention the cabin, the freezing cold, or the unpaid utility bills. I kept the caption brutally simple: enjoying a quiet holiday dinner. Then I did the one thing I knew would push my family over the edge, into absolute madness. I tapped the location button and tagged the St. Regis Aspen Resort. I hit post and set my phone face up on the table. The trap was baited, and now all I had to do was wait for the rats to bite. I took my time, enjoying my meal, savoring the rich, earthy flavor of the truffles and the smooth finish of the wine. I knew exactly what was happening in that dark, freezing cabin. Chelsea would be scrolling through her feed, desperately looking for ammunition to fuel her victim complex. She would see my glowing face in the location tag. She would show it to Marcus, and his fragile ego would completely shatter. He was the golden child, the finance executive who was supposed to be the wealthy provider. Seeing his sister, the woman he considered a lowly customer service worker, staying at a $15,000 a night resort while he shivered in the dark, would destroy him. It took exactly 14 minutes. My phone screen lit up, illuminating the white tablecloth. A text message from Marcus flashed across the glass. I slowly sipped my Bordeaux before reading his frantic digital tantrum. "I see your location tag, Naomi," he wrote with entitled rage. "You think you are so smart, showing off on the internet while your own family freezes? You think you can humiliate us like this?" I did not reply, simply watching the typing bubble appear and disappear as his fury overrode his ability to form a coherent sentence. "How did you even get into the St. Regis?" he demanded in the next text. "That place has been booked solid for months. You probably lied your way in or spent your entire life savings just to spite us. You are pathetic." Still, I offered no response. Silence is the ultimate weapon against a narcissist. A massive block of text arrived. "Listen to me very carefully, Naomi. I am the man of this family and you will respect me. Chelsea is crying because the baby is freezing, and it is entirely your fault. We are not staying in this dark icebox another minute. I know exactly where you are now. We are packing the kids into the SUV, and we are driving to the St. Regis right now." I set my wine glass down, watching the threat materialize on the screen. "You are going to meet us in the VIP lobby," Marcus continued, his texts coming through in rapid, aggressive bursts. "You are going to hand over the key to whatever room you scammed your way into, and you are going to let my wife and children sleep in a warm bed. You can sleep in your rental car for all I care. If you do not hand over that key the second we walk through those doors, I swear to God, I will make a massive scene. I will scream in the middle of that fancy lobby. I will let everyone in that hotel know exactly what kind of selfish, evil aunt you are. I will embarrass you in front of all those rich white people you are trying so hard to impress. We are 10 minutes away. Be in the lobby." I read the threat and laughed. Marcus thought public embarrassment would force me into submission because that was how our parents operated. Patricia and Leon were terrified of looking bad, and Marcus assumed I shared that same generational trauma. He thought I would cower and surrender my key to keep him quiet. He had no idea he was walking into my territory. I signaled the waiter and signed the check to my room. I slowly stood up, smoothing the emerald silk of my long evening gown, and calmly walked out of the restaurant. I certainly did not go back to my penthouse to hide. I walked directly into the grand VIP lounge located just off the main lobby. The space was filled with plush leather sofas, burning fireplaces, and the absolute wealthiest guests in the resort. I found a comfortable armchair facing the entrance, crossed my legs, and waited.
The digital conflict was over, and the physical confrontation was finally about to begin. Right now, in this very room, the heavy, frosted glass doors of the VIP lounge flew open with enough force to rattle the brass hinges. The serene atmosphere of quiet wealth was instantly obliterated. Marcus marched through the entrance with his shoulders squared and his jaw set in a permanent scowl. Right behind him was Chelsea, dragging their twin boys by the wrists while balancing a red-faced, screaming baby on her hip. They blew right past the horrified concierge, who tried to intercept them. Marcus scanned the room. His eyes locked onto me sitting comfortably in a high-back leather armchair. He crossed the plush carpet in long, aggressive strides. He was trying to channel Leon, using physical intimidation to force compliance. For my entire life, Marcus had used his size and loud voice to get his way. Our parents had always told me to just listen to my brother, to defer to the man of the house. "Give me the key," Naomi Marcus demanded, stopping inches from my chair. His voice was a harsh, raspy whisper, designed to threaten me without alerting the security guard standing near the bar. "You have played your little game and had your fun. Now hand over the room key. My children are freezing, and I am not asking you again." I uncrossed my legs and placed my empty wine glass onto the side table. I looked up at him, taking in his snow-dampened coat and his panicked, bloodshot eyes. "You are not asking me because you are in absolutely no position to demand anything," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly leveled. "I paid for my penthouse with my own money. If your children are freezing, you should probably take them to a motel you can actually afford. I hear the budget inns on the highway have excellent heating." Marcus lunged forward, slamming his hands onto the armrests of my chair. He leaned his face close to mine. "I am not leaving here without that key," he growled. "You are embarrassing this family." I did not flinch. "You embarrassed yourself, Marcus. You brought a wife and 3 kids up a mountain without securing shelter. You act like a wealthy finance executive, but you cannot even afford a basic hotel room in an emergency. You are a fraud." Seeing that Marcus was failing to intimidate me, Chelsea decided it was time to deploy her ultimate weapon. She dropped her heavy diaper bag onto the marble floor with a loud, deliberate thud. The sound echoed across the lounge. Conversations at nearby tables came to an abrupt halt. Wealthy patrons in cashmere and diamonds turned their heads to watch the spectacle. Chelsea dropped to her knees right in the middle of the lounge. She clutched the crying baby to her chest and buried her face in the infant snowsuit. Then she unleashed a wail so loud and so agonizing it sounded like she was being physically attacked.
How can you do this to us?
Chelsea screamed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings.
How can you be so heartless, Naomi? We are your family. Your own nieces and nephews are turning blue from the cold, and you are sitting here, hoarding a luxury penthouse all to yourself?
The performance was Oscar-worthy. Chelsea sobbed hysterically, ensuring that every single white patron in the VIP lounge heard her narrative. She was playing the victimized, desperate mother and casting me as the aggressive, selfish black woman who was putting children in danger. It was a racial and social dynamic she had manipulated countless times before. She knew exactly how it looked to the audience.
Please, Naomi!
Chelsea wailed louder, rocking back and forth on the floor.
I am begging you. I am on my knees begging you. Just let my baby sleep in a warm bed tonight. Why do you hate us so much? Why are you punishing my innocent children?
Whispers erupted around the room. I could feel the judgmental stares of the affluent guests boring into my skin. A woman at the next table covered her mouth in shock. A man in a tailored suit glared at me with pure disgust. Chelsea was banking on my fear of public shame. My parents had raised me to believe that causing a scene in front of white people was the ultimate sin. They had taught me to shrink myself to apologize, to surrender my own comfort just to avoid a spectacle. Chelsea expected me to throw the room key at her just to make the whispering stop. Instead, I slowly stood up. I looked down at my sobbing sister-in-law, and then raised my head to look directly at the audience she had captivated. "If you were actually concerned about your innocent children, Chelsea," I said, projecting my voice so it carried clearly across the entire lounge, "you would not have brought 3 bottles of vintage champagne instead of groceries. You would not have planned to dump them on me so you and your broke husband could go skiing. And you certainly would not be kneeling on a resort floor using your infant as a prop to extort a free luxury hotel room from a woman you treat like garbage." Chelsea gasped, her fake tears momentarily pausing as my words cut through her narrative. Marcus grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "Shut your mouth right now," he hissed. "Take your hands off me, Marcus," I commanded, my voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You are completely broke. Your credit cards are maxed out. You owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to people who do not play nice. Do not try to bully me into funding your fake lifestyle. Take your crying wife and leave my presence before I have you thrown out." I shook his hand off my arm. The crowd was completely silent, now captivated by the reality of the situation. Chelsea realized her victim routine had failed to break me. She looked up at Marcus, her face twisted in genuine panic as my words about his debt registered in her mind. But before either of them could launch another attack, the heavy glass doors of the lounge swung open again. The cavalry had arrived to reinforce them. Patricia and Leon marched into the room, their faces contorted with rage, bringing the next wave of the nightmare right to my feet. My mother, Patricia, was a woman who practically lived for Sunday service optics. She wore a pristine tailored cashmere coat and a perfectly styled silk wrap around her hair, projecting the ultimate image of a respectable, affluent matriarch. But the sheer fury twisting her features right now completely shattered that carefully crafted facade. Leon trailed right beside her, his chest puffed out, attempting to look like the authoritative patriarch. He glared at me as if I were a stranger who had just insulted him in the street. Neither of them spared a single glance of reprimand for Chelsea, who was still kneeling on the expensive imported rug, clutching a bewildered infant and performing a theatrical weeping routine. They completely ignored Marcus, who was standing there red-faced and visibly sweating from his own financial panic. Instead, they zeroed in entirely on me, the designated family scapegoat. Patricia rushed forward, sidestepping her sobbing daughter-in-law. She leaned down, placing both of her manicured hands firmly on the armrests of my leather chair, boxing me in. Her designer perfume was suffocating. "Naomi Marie, what is wrong with you?" she hissed, her voice a harsh, vibrating whisper meant to avoid carrying across the room while maximizing the venom directed at me. "Look around you right now. Look at these people." She gestured sharply with her chin toward the other patrons in the VIP lounge. The predominantly white, affluent guests were overtly staring at our family. Some were whispering behind their crystal cocktail glasses, while others were blatantly watching the spectacle unfold. To Patricia, this was the ultimate catastrophe. Generational trauma and respectability politics ran deep in her veins. She genuinely believed that our entire worth as a Black family depended entirely on making sure wealthy white people felt comfortable around us. "You are embarrassing us," Patricia spat, her eyes wide with frantic anger. "You are making us look like some unruly ghetto family right in front of all these respectable people. How dare you sit here sipping wine while your brother's wife is crying on the floor? Get up right now and fix this." I did not move a single muscle. I looked directly into my mother's eyes, refusing to shrink myself. "Chelsea is the one throwing a tantrum on the floor, Patricia," I replied, my tone dangerously calm. "Marcus is the one shouting. I am simply sitting in a chair I paid for. If you are worried about looking like an unruly family, I suggest you tell your golden child and his wife to stand up and act like the wealthy adults they pretend to be." Leon stepped forward, pointing a thick, calloused finger directly at my face. "You do not talk back to your mother," he growled, his voice rumbling with an underlying threat. "You caused this entire mess by changing the code on my cabin. You dragged us out here into the cold, and now you are sitting in a luxury suite that you probably put on a credit card you cannot afford. You are going to stand up, hand over your room key to Marcus, and walk out of this hotel." I stared at the man who had the absolute audacity to claim ownership of a cabin he had lost to the IRS 3 years ago. His arrogance was truly boundless. He was demanding I surrender my sanctuary to reward his son's financial incompetence. Patricia suddenly noticed the heavy black digital key card resting on the small marble table next to my wine glass. Her eyes darted from my face to the key. Without a second of hesitation, she lunged for it. Her manicured hand swiped through the air, her sharp nails scraping against the marble surface. My reflexes were faster. I slammed my hand down flat over the keycard, trapping it beneath my palm just a fraction of a second before her fingers could snatch it. The loud smack of my hand hitting the table echoed sharply, causing Patricia to physically recoil in shock. She gasped, clutching her chest as if I had just struck her. "Do not ever reach for my property again," I warned, my voice dropping an octave, carrying a lethal edge that made even Marcus take a sudden step back. Patricia's chest heaved. "You selfish, ungrateful girl!" she hissed, dropping the whisper entirely. "You have no husband, you have no children, you have absolutely no responsibilities in this world. Marcus has a family to provide for. He needs this suite. You are going to take your bag and you are going to go find a cheap motel down the highway. Sleep in your rental car for all I care. But you will not sit here and humiliate your brother while holding a luxury room hostage." The sheer cruelty of her words hung in the air. For 32 years, my mother had viewed my independence not as an achievement, but as a failure to conform to her specific script. Because I did not have a husband to validate me, or children to tie me down, my comfort meant absolutely nothing to her. My safety meant nothing. She was actively ordering me to sleep in a freezing vehicle in the middle of an aspen blizzard so her financially fraudulent son could sleep in a $15,000 bed. I slowly pulled the keycard off the table and slid it into the pocket of my emerald evening gown. I stood up, rising to my full height, smoothing the silk fabric. The entire family took a collective step back. I looked at Patricia and Leon stripping away decades of familial obligation in one sweeping glance. "Let me explain something to you," I said, my voice projecting clearly, addressing my parents but ensuring Marcus and Chelsea heard every single syllable. "You came into a 5-star resort that you cannot afford. You demanded a suite you did not pay for. You are using a crying infant as leverage to steal a hotel room because your golden son is drowning in debt and you are all too financially illiterate to secure your own lodging. And you have the absolute nerve to tell me that I am the one embarrassing you?" Leon's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He opened his mouth to roar another command, to exert the last failing remnants of his patriarchal control. But before he could unleash his fury, the heavy double doors of the VIP lounge swung open yet again. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly as 4 broad-shouldered security guards in tailored black suits marched directly toward our standoff, flanked by a tall, impeccably dressed white man wearing a silver name tag that identified him as the general manager of the resort. Chelsea scrambled up from the floor, immediately attempting to arrange her face into a mask of pure victimhood, ready to deploy her tears against me to the authorities. The general manager stepped forward, his polished black Oxford silent against the thick carpet. He radiated that specific brand of quiet corporate authority that usually terrified people like my parents. The 4 security guards fanned out behind him, creating a formidable wall of dark suits and earpieces. Before the manager could open his mouth to address the disruption, Chelsea lunged toward him. She threw herself into his personal space, clutching her crying baby to her chest like a human shield. She had instantly identified him as the man in charge, and she knew exactly how to play this game. "Oh, thank God you are here," Chelsea gasped, her voice trembling with manufactured relief. She reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his tailored suit. Her eyes were wide and brimming with fresh tears. "You have to help us. That woman sitting right there is completely unhinged. She stole our family reservation and changed the locks on our cabin, leaving my innocent children out in a freezing blizzard. When we came here to peacefully ask for our room key, she physically assaulted my mother-in-law. She is dangerous." The audacity of the lie was breathtaking, but entirely predictable. Chelsea was delivering a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. She utilized every single societal stereotype available to her. She painted herself as the terrified, innocent mother and cast me as the aggressive, hostile threat. She knew that in a room full of affluent white patrons, her tears were the most powerful currency available. She expected the manager to take one look at her sobbing face and immediately call the police to drag me out in handcuffs. Marcus puffed out his chest and stepped up right beside his wife. He crossed his arms, trying to look like the protective husband, rather than a man drowning in gambling debt. "It is true, sir," Marcus lied smoothly, his voice dripping with false concern. "My sister has been having severe mental health episodes lately. We brought her on this luxury vacation to help her recover, but she had a complete psychotic break. She hacked into our accounts, canceled our reservations, and is now holding our hotel accommodations hostage. We just want our room key so my freezing children can sleep." I remained seated in my leather armchair, my posture perfectly relaxed. I did not raise my voice to defend myself. I did not frantically deny their accusations. I simply watched the performance unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a poorly acted play. My emerald silk gown draped elegantly over the armrest, and my hands rested calmly in my lap. I knew that any reaction from me, any raised voice or sudden movement, would immediately be used as evidence to validate their fabricated narrative. Patricia and Leon quickly flanked Marcus and Chelsea, forming a united front of deceit. My parents were absolutely terrified of causing a scene in front of the wealthy establishment. They had spent their entire lives bowing to respectability politics, believing that proximity to whiteness equated to personal value. Now they were desperate to distance themselves from their unruly daughter and align themselves with the authority figure. "I am so incredibly sorry for this disturbance, sir," Leon said, dropping his booming patriarchal tone and adopting a submissive, apologetic cadence. "I am Leon, the patriarch of this family, and I apologize for my daughter's erratic behavior. We are a very respectable family, I assure you. We are deeply embarrassed that her mental instability has spilled over into your beautiful establishment. If you could just have your security team retrieve the penthouse keycard from her pocket, we will quietly escort her off the premises and handle her episode privately." Patricia nodded vigorously, smoothing her expensive cashmere coat. "Yes, please," she added, offering the manager a tight, anxious smile. "We just want to get our grandbabies into the suite we paid for. She has been incredibly aggressive tonight. She actually slammed her hand down and nearly struck me when I tried to reason with her. We are genuinely afraid she might hurt someone if your guards do not intervene right now." The crowd of affluent bystanders in the VIP lounge murmured in collective horror. They cast sympathetic glances toward Chelsea and the crying baby, while shooting daggers of judgment in my direction. The narrative had been successfully planted and eagerly accepted by the audience. The wealthy patrons saw exactly what they had been conditioned to see: a distressed white mother, a respectable older black couple trying to manage a crisis, and a hostile, uncooperative black woman refusing to comply. Chelsea buried her face in her husband's shoulder, her shoulders heaving with fake sobs. She peered at me through her tangled hair, and a fleeting, triumphant smirk crossed her lips. She thought she had won. She thought the presence of the white manager and his security team guaranteed my immediate removal and her ultimate victory. She expected to be handed the key to a $15,000 a night penthouse on a silver platter simply because she knew how to cry on cue. The general manager stood perfectly still, absorbing the barrage of frantic accusations and apologies. His expression remained completely unreadable. He looked at Chelsea, clutching her baby, then at Marcus, puffing his chest, then at Leon and Patricia, bowing their heads in submissive apology. He did not immediately signal the security guards to move in. He did not pull out a radio to call the local police department. He simply adjusted his cuffs and took a slow, deliberate breath. "Ma'am," the manager said, addressing Chelsea in a perfectly calm and measured tone. "You are claiming that this woman stole your reservation and physically assaulted your family members right here in this exclusive lounge." "Yes," Chelsea cried eagerly, nodding her head up and down. "She is completely out of her mind and out of control. You need to have her arrested immediately. Just get our room key from her first." The manager turned his icy gaze away from my deceitful family and looked directly at me. The security guards shifted their heavy weight, their hands resting lightly near their communication devices. Marcus and Chelsea leaned forward, their eyes gleaming with malicious anticipation and greed. Patricia let out a loud, dramatic breath of relief, believing the ordeal was finally over and their precious social standing had been perfectly preserved. Leon stood incredibly tall, ready to watch his disobedient daughter be thoroughly humiliated and brutally dragged out into the freezing Colorado snow by law enforcement. They all eagerly waited for the manager to deliver the final crushing blow. The tension in the VIP lounge was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Chelsea held her breath, her fake tears completely suspended as she waited for the white manager in the tailored suit to validate her victimhood. Marcus puffed out his chest, preparing to watch his sister be humiliated and dragged out by security. Patricia and Leon wore identical expressions of smug, righteous anticipation. They had successfully leveraged their respectability and Chelsea's theatrics to orchestrate my downfall. They were absolutely certain of their victory. The general manager took a deliberate step forward. He walked right past Chelsea, completely ignoring her outstretched hand and the infant she was holding like a prop. He walked past Marcus, who instinctively stepped aside. He walked past my parents, who had already begun to arrange their faces into masks of apologetic pity. He stopped exactly 2 feet in front of my leather armchair. The entire room went dead silent. The only sound was the crackle of the burning firewood in the massive stone hearth. The general manager did not extend his hand to demand my room key. He did not ask for my identification or summon the 4 large security guards waiting behind him. Instead, he placed his right hand over his chest and bowed deeply. It was not a simple nod of customer service courtesy, but a profound gesture of absolute deference. "Miss Naomi," he said, his voice echoing clearly across the hushed lounge. "I apologize profusely for this unacceptable disruption to your evening. How would you like us to handle these trespassers? Shall I have security escort them off the property? Or would you prefer I call the local police department to press formal trespassing charges?" The silence that followed his words was absolute and deafening. Chelsea literally dropped her jaw. Her mouth hung open in an unflattering circle of pure bewilderment, the fake tears drying instantly on her cheeks. Marcus blinked rapidly, his brain violently rejecting the scene unfolding in front of him. Patricia swayed on her feet, her hands flying to her pearl necklace as if the oxygen had just been sucked out of the room. Leon stood paralyzed, his authoritative posture crumbling into a slump of sheer confusion. "Excuse me?" Marcus stammered, his aggressive tone completely eradicated, replaced by a high-pitched squeak of disbelief. "What are you doing? She is not supposed to be here. She is just a customer service rep. She stole this reservation. You are supposed to throw her out." The general manager slowly stood up straight and turned his head to look at Marcus. The deference he had shown me vanished instantly, replaced by a gaze of absolute Arctic disdain. "Sir," the manager said, his voice slicing through the air like a razor blade, "I highly suggest you lower your voice and step back. You are currently screaming at the majority shareholder of the Horizon Hospitality Group. Ms. Naomi does not need a reservation at this resort because she literally owns the building you are standing in." Patricia let out a loud, undignified gasp. She grabbed Leon's arm for support, her manicured fingers digging into his wool coat. "Owns the building." She breathed the words tumbling out of her mouth as if she were speaking a foreign language. I calmly picked up my wine glass, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my Bordeaux before standing up. The silk of my emerald gown cascaded perfectly to the floor. I looked at the four faces of my so-called family, watching their entire worldview shatter into a million jagged pieces. "You see, Marcus?" I began projecting my voice so every wealthy patron in the lounge could hear the absolute truth. "When I told you I worked in luxury travel concierge services, you assumed I was answering phones in a cubicle. You assumed that because you have spent your entire life underestimating me. You needed me to be a failure so you could feel better about your own disastrous financial reality." I took a slow step toward him, forcing him to back up. "While you were busy gambling away your salary and racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to dangerous loan sharks, I was building an empire." I continued, my eyes locking onto his terrified face. "I started by curating travel for billionaires. Then I started managing their hospitality portfolios. 2 years ago, my investment firm acquired the holding company that owns this St. Regis property, along with 12 other 5-star resorts across the globe. So when I told you I paid for this penthouse, I was being literal. I own the penthouse. I own this lounge. I own the chairs you are standing next to." Chelsea clutched her baby tighter, her face turning a sickly shade of pale. But she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her humiliation. "We are your family. You are incredibly wealthy. Why did not you tell us? Why would you let us stay in a freezing cabin when you own a resort?" "Because you never asked," I replied sharply, cutting her off. "You never asked about my life, my business, or my success. You only called me when you needed a free babysitter, a maid, or a scapegoat. You walked into my property tonight, planning to use your white tears to have me arrested and thrown out into the snow. You thought your performance would manipulate the staff into destroying me." I turned to look at my mother, who was visibly trembling. Patricia had spent her entire life worshipping wealth and status. Realizing that the daughter she had treated like dirt was actually a hospitality magnate was short-circuiting her brain. "Naomi, sweetheart Patricia," stammered her voice, suddenly dripping with a desperate, sickly sweet affection. She took a step toward me, holding her hands out pleadingly. "This is all just a terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea you were so successful. We are so incredibly proud of you. Since you own the resort, you can just give us the penthouse suite, right? We can order room service and celebrate your amazing achievements as a family. We can put this all behind us." The sheer audacity of her pivot was breathtaking. 5 minutes ago, she was ordering me to sleep in my rental car so her golden child could have my bed. Now she was ready to order caviar on my dime. I looked at my mother, stripping away the last remaining shred of my daughterly obligation. I turned my back to her and faced the general manager. "No police," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "I do not want the police involved. However, these 4 individuals are no longer welcome on this property. Security will escort them out the front doors immediately. If they attempt to step foot on the resort grounds again, you have my full authorization to have them arrested for trespassing." "Yes, Ms. Naomi," the manager replied, snapping his fingers to signal the guards. The 4 massive security guards moved in unison, instantly flanking Marcus, Chelsea, and my parents. The physical barrier between me and their toxicity was finally erected. Wait, you cannot do this, Leon roared, trying to summon his patriarchal fury one last time as a guard placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. We have nowhere to go. The cabin has no power. It is freezing. Then I suggest you drive fast, Leon, I replied, offering him a cold, flawless smile. I hear the temperature is dropping to single digits tonight. Enjoy the cabin. The guards began to forcefully herd them toward the glass doors. Chelsea started screaming again, but this time her tears were completely real. The facade was broken, and the consequences of their actions were finally taking hold. I turned my back to the commotion, taking my seat by the fire as they were shoved out into the brutal winter night. The massive security guards did not leave any room for negotiation. They formed a tight, impenetrable wall of black suits and ushered my relatives toward the heavy glass exit doors. Marcus attempted to plant his feet into the plush carpet, trying to salvage a shred of his shattered masculinity. He puffed out his chest and raised a finger toward the tallest guard. "Do not touch my wife!" he barked, his voice cracking under the pressure. The guard simply stepped forward, forcing Marcus backward with a sheer physical presence that made my brother stumble over his own expensive boots. Chelsea was completely unhinged now. The performative weeping had morphed into genuine panicked hysteria. She clutched her wailing baby and dragged the twins by their coat sleeves, screaming that this was illegal and threatening to sue the entire resort. Her shrill voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, drawing the attention of every single patron in the vicinity. This was the exact nightmare scenario my parents had spent their entire lives trying to avoid. Patricia threw her hands up over her face, desperately trying to shield her features from the wealthy onlookers. But it was far too late. I watched from my armchair by the fire as a dozen smartphones were raised in the air. The bright flashes of phone cameras illuminated my mother's horrified expression. The elite guests of the VIP lounge were recording the spectacle, eagerly capturing the unruly family being forcefully ejected into the snow. Patricia's pristine church reputation, her decades of carefully cultivated respectability politics evaporated in a chorus of camera clicks. Leon looked like a deflated balloon. The booming patriarch who commanded the front pew every Sunday was now shuffling backward, keeping his head down, completely stripped of his authority. The heavy glass doors slid open, letting in a blast of freezing mountain air. The security guards pushed them out onto the icy pavement, and the doors firmly sealed shut behind them. I did not move from my seat. I took another sip of my wine and let the warmth of the fire wash over me while they faced the brutal reality of the Colorado winter. Outside, the temperature had plummeted well below freezing. The wind howled, tearing through their designer coats as they scrambled across the icy parking lot toward Marcus's leased SUV. They piled into the freezing vehicle, shivering uncontrollably. The illusion of their wealth had been stripped away, leaving them with nothing but the harsh consequences of their own entitlement. The drive back to the dark cabin was a masterclass in suffocating tension. According to the furious text messages Chelsea would later accidentally send to the family group chat, the ride was completely silent except for the chattering of teeth and the exhausted crying of the children. Leon gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, refusing to look at his wife. Patricia stared out the passenger window, her mind frantically trying to process how the daughter she viewed as a peasant was actually the queen of the castle. When they finally pulled into the snow-covered driveway of the cabin, the true nightmare began. The property was completely pitch black. The security lights were dead. The porch was covered in a fresh layer of unshoveled snow. Marcus punched the keypad, but the electronic lock was completely dead, devoid of any power. He had to use the manual emergency key Patricia kept hidden under a fake rock near the stairs. They pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped into an absolute icebox. Without the central heating system, running the internal temperature of the cabin had dropped to match the freezing environment outside. Their breath plumed in white clouds in the dark living room. The grand vacation they had planned at my expense was nothing but a frozen tomb. The moment the heavy door shut behind them, the fragile alliance holding my toxic family together completely shattered. They turned on their phone flashlights, casting long, jagged shadows against the wooden walls. The beam of light caught Marcus, shivering in his damp coat. Chelsea dropped the heavy diaper bag onto the frozen hardwood floor and finally snapped. The mask of the loving, supportive wife completely fell off, revealing the vicious opportunist beneath.
You are absolutely useless, Marcus! She screamed, her voice echoing in the dark, empty cabin. You stood there and let your sister humiliate us in front of half of Aspen. You promised me a luxury vacation. You promised me 5-star service, and now my children are freezing in the dark because you are too weak to put your own sister in her place.
Marcus flinched, stepping back from his wife's verbal assault. I tried, Chelsea, he stammered, his voice defensive but weak. You saw the security guards. She owns the building. What was I supposed to do?
You were supposed to be a man,
Chelsea shrieked, taking a step toward him. You walk around wearing expensive suits and pretending you are some high-rolling finance executive, but you are broke. Your credit cards are declining everywhere. You owe money to people we cannot even name, and you let the one person in your family who actually has money throw us out into the snow like garbage. You are a pathetic fraud, Marcus. Patricia gasped, from the corner of the room shining her flashlight directly into Chelsea's furious face. Do not you dare speak to my son that way, Patricia yelled, her maternal defense mechanism kicking in to protect her golden child. Marcus is doing the best he can. He is under a lot of stress. You are his wife. You should be supporting him instead of screaming like a banshee. Support him. Chelsea laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that held zero respect for her mother-in-law. Support what, exactly, Patricia? The mountain of debt he is hiding? The fake lifestyle you people project at your little church? You both coddle him and treat him like a king while treating the only successful person in your family like a slave. Look where your precious golden boy got us. We are freezing in the dark because your entire family is a complete joke. Leon roared from the hallway, telling them both to shut up, but his voice held no power in the dark. The patriarchal illusion was dead. The family was eating itself alive. The blame shifted rapidly, bouncing from Marcus's financial incompetence to Patricia's enabling behavior, and finally back to the bitter reality that they had completely underestimated me. The bitter arguments bounced off the frozen walls, creating a symphony of destruction. They had spent their entire lives pretending to be the perfect affluent family, looking down on anyone who did not meet their ridiculous standards. Now their facade was completely stripped away, leaving them vulnerable, desperate, and entirely dependent on the one daughter they had relentlessly abused. The screaming match escalated, tearing down decades of carefully maintained lies and exposing the rotten core of their family dynamic. They had absolutely nothing left to hide behind. The cold was settling deep into their bones, but the chilling realization of their own massive failure was far more punishing than the winter snow. I sat by the roaring fireplace in my penthouse, swirling the remaining drops of Bordeaux in my glass. The notifications from the family group chat had gone completely silent. I knew they were in the cabin fighting among themselves as the temperature plummeted. I was just about to order a dessert from room service when my phone lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID displayed my mother's name, Patricia. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the screen. I expected another barrage of insults or a desperate demand for the access code to the thermostat. Instead, a wet, shaky sob came through the speaker. It was the performance of a lifetime. Naomi, please, Patricia wept. Her voice was brittle and small, completely stripped of the church lady arrogance she had worn like armor just an hour ago. Please do not hang up on me. I am so sorry. I am just a terrified mother and I need my daughter. I placed my wine glass on the coffee table. The emotional whiplash was staggering but entirely predictable. When intimidation failed, the narcissist always pivoted to the victim role. I did not offer a single word of comfort. I simply waited for the inevitable request. "We are freezing!" Naomi Patricia cried, her teeth audibly chattering through the phone. "But that is not even the worst of it. The things Chelsea just screamed at your brother in the dark? It is bad, Naomi. It is so much worse than I ever thought. Marcus is in terrible trouble. He is always in trouble, Patricia," I replied, my tone clinical. "He has been in trouble since he was 16 years old. What makes tonight any different?" "He owes money," she sobbed, lowering her voice to a desperate, frantic whisper. $200,000, Naomi. He owes it to people who do not use collection agencies. Dangerous people. Men who have been calling his phone and threatening to show up at his office. That is why Chelsea is so hysterical. That is why he is so on edge. He was hoping to hide out up here in the mountains while he figured something out. But now we have nothing. I leaned back against the plush velvet cushions. The golden child, the supposed financial genius who looked down his nose at my hospitality business, was running from loan sharks. The irony was almost too heavy to hold. "And since you found out I own a hospitality empire, you expect me to write a check to make his bad decisions disappear," I stated, cutting right to the absolute core of her manipulation. "You are his sister," Patricia pleaded, ramping up the emotional guilt trip. "You are a strong, successful Black woman. God blessed you with this immense wealth so you could be the anchor of this family. We have to protect our own Naomi. We have to stick together in times of crisis. If those men find him, they will hurt him. You have millions of dollars. $200,000 is nothing to you now. You can save your brother's life tonight." The sheer audacity of her logic made my chest tighten. She was trying to weaponize my race, my gender, and my success to guilt me into funding her son's gambling addiction. She was demanding that I act as the sacrificial savior for a man who had never once treated me with an ounce of respect. "Save his life," I echoed softly. "That is a fascinating request coming from you, Patricia. Let us take a quick walk down memory lane. Let us talk about family loyalty and protecting our own. Do you remember what happened the summer before my sophomore year of college?" Patricia went dead silent on the other end of the line. "I worked double shifts at the hotel front desk every single day that summer," I continued, my voice rising with years of suppressed righteous anger. "I saved $12,000 to pay my tuition. And what did you do, Patricia? You used your access as a joint account holder to drain every single penny of my college fund. You took my tuition money and you gave it to Marcus to pay off his credit card debt, because he blew his salary trying to impress Chelsea. You let me drop out of my university classes for a semester because you decided his ego was more important than my education." "Naomi, that was a long time ago," Patricia stammered. "He was young. He made a mistake." "He made a mistake, and I paid the price," I snapped back. "And what about 3 years ago, when Chelsea demanded that luxury baby shower? You guilted me into taking out a personal loan for $5,000 because you said it was my duty as an aunt to provide for my nephew. You promised Marcus would pay me back the next month. He never gave me a dime. He went to Cabo with his boys instead, while I worked weekends to pay off the interest. You have spent your entire life financially abusing me to protect him. You have plenty of money now," Patricia cried, completely abandoning the apology and reverting to pure entitlement. "Why are you bringing up the past? I am telling you, your brother is in physical danger. How can you sit in a luxury penthouse and let your own flesh and blood face violent criminals?" "Because his debt is his problem," I replied, my voice as cold as the snow outside. "I am not your financial safety net. I am not the family bank. I will not give Marcus a single cent of the money I worked relentlessly to earn. Not a dime, Patricia. He wanted to live the high life of a fake finance bro, so he can deal with the consequences of his fraudulent lifestyle.
You are a monster!
Patricia shrieked, the mask of the loving mother completely burning away.
You are a cold, evil woman. I am your mother, and I am commanding you to help your brother right now. If anything happens to him, his blood is on your hands.
No, I corrected her. His blood is on yours. You enabled him. You babied him. You taught him that he could make any mess in the world and a black woman would always be there to clean it up.
Well, the maid service is officially canceled.
I did not wait for her to scream another insult. I ended the call and placed my phone face down on the table. The deep-seated conditioning that usually demanded I appease my parents was completely gone. I felt no guilt, no hesitation, no lingering doubt. I had finally severed the parasitic cord that tied me to their dysfunction. They had created this nightmare, and they were going to live in it. I walked over to the minibar, poured myself a fresh glass of wine, and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the dark mountain range. Marcus was a grown man who had made his own choices. Patricia and Leon had cheered him on every step of the way. I was finally free from the burden of their expectations. But the silence of my phone did not last long. The final blow of the night was still to come, and it would originate from the most arrogant man I had ever known. The heavy mahogany doors of the VIP lounge closed behind Marcus, Chelsea, Patricia, and Leon, shutting out their frantic chaos and locking them out in the freezing Colorado snow. Inside, the atmosphere instantly returned to its previous state of quiet, understated luxury. The wealthy patrons who had paused to watch the spectacle smoothly resumed their conversations, sipping their champagne and slicing into their gourmet meals as if nothing had happened. I settled back into my plush leather armchair, letting out a long, slow breath that released the last vestiges of tension in my shoulders. I took a final sip of my vintage Bordeaux, enjoying the rich, complex flavors on my tongue. I had completely dismantled their entitlement, weaponized their own arrogance against them, and proven that the daughter they treated like a domestic servant was actually the master of their domain. But I knew the story was far from over. A narcissist backed into a corner does not accept defeat. They lash out with whatever destructive force they have left. I checked my watch, noting that it was approaching 9 o'clock in the evening. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the snow was falling even heavier, casting a thick white blanket over the resort grounds and completely burying the mountain roads in deep drifts. It was the kind of winter storm that trapped people inside, forcing them to face their immediate reality with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. For my family, that reality meant a pitch-black, freezing cabin with dead utilities and a complete lack of emotional or financial survival skills. I imagined them huddled together in the dark, shivering under damp coats, turning on each other with the viciousness of trapped animals. I pictured Chelsea screaming at Marcus for being a fraud, Patricia crying over her shattered social standing, and Leon desperately pacing the frozen floorboards, trying to figure out how to reclaim the patriarchal control he had lost forever. My phone resting quietly on the side table suddenly buzzed once with a sharp, piercing vibration. The screen lit up, cutting through the warm ambient light of the lounge. I picked it up, expecting another frantic plea or a pathetic apology disguised as family concern. Instead, the notification banner displayed a message from Leon. Even before opening the thread, I could feel the malice radiating from the sender. I unlocked the device and tapped open the message. The words flashed across my screen like a lightning strike, burning into my retinas with a toxic fury that laid bare the absolute depths of his desperation. "You are no longer my daughter," the text began, every word dripping with wounded pride and spiteful rage. "I just called my broker. I am selling the Aspen cabin tomorrow morning to pay Marcus's debts. You think you can humiliate us and get away with it? You are cut out of this family's wealth forever." I stared at the screen, reading the message twice to let the sheer laughable absurdity of it truly sink in. My father, a man who had not legitimately owned a single square inch of that property in over 3 years, a man whose credit score was currently cratering and whose every financial lifeline was completely severed, was threatening to sell my asset out from under me to bail out his delinquent son. He was standing on my property, freezing in the dark, and his ultimate weapon of mass destruction was to illegally sell a house that belonged to the IRS before I bought it, all while falsely believing he was still the wealthy patriarch of a crumbling estate. It was a masterclass in monumental delusion. He genuinely thought that by disinheriting me from a fictional fortune, he was inflicting a devastating emotional and financial blow. He had no earthly idea that the trap was about to snap shut on him in a way he could never possibly imagine. I did not feel a single drop of anger as I read his hollow threat. I felt only a cold, sharp amusement. The pieces of the final endgame were sliding effortlessly into place. By threatening to sell the cabin tomorrow morning, Leon had unwittingly signed his own legal eviction notice and accelerated his own public downfall. He was actively planning to commit real estate fraud on camera, attempting to liquidate an asset he had no legal right to touch, all to feed the bottomless pit of Marcus's gambling debts. I knew exactly how I was going to handle it. I did not need to scream, I did not need to argue, and I certainly did not need to reply to his text. Engaging with his childish tantrum would only dilute the impact of the legal guillotine I was about to drop on his head. Instead, I calmly locked my phone, slipped it into the pocket of my emerald green evening gown, and stood up from the armchair. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting a warm glow across the room as I walked toward the private elevator that would take me up to my penthouse suite. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing me away from the noise and the cold, a profound sense of clarity washed over me. Let him call his broker. Let him draft the listing documents. Let him believe for one more night that he still held the cards. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rose over the snow-capped peaks of Aspen, the illusion would shatter permanently. I pressed the button for the penthouse, ready to orchestrate the sweetest, most absolute revenge of my life. The elevator doors slid open silently, depositing me directly into the private foyer of my sanctuary. The penthouse was a masterpiece of modern alpine architecture, featuring soaring glass windows, exposed timber beams, and plush textured fabrics. The air was perfectly climate-controlled, carrying a faint, relaxing hint of cedar and expensive vanilla. I kicked off my heels, letting my bare feet sink deeply into the thick, heated Tibetan rug. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the text thread from Leon one more time. I read his ridiculous, aggressive ultimatum again, letting the sheer comedy of his words wash over me. He was actually going to sell my house to pay off his son's massive gambling debts to dangerous loan sharks. He was going to permanently disinherit me from a completely bankrupt estate. I let out a sharp, genuine laugh that echoed through the empty, cavernous living room. The arrogance of a man who owned absolutely nothing, demanding total submission from the woman who owned everything around him, was truly a psychological marvel. I took a screenshot of the text message. I opened a new message thread and selected the contact for my lead real estate and asset protection attorney, Elias Davis. Elias was a ruthless, brilliant legal mind who managed my most complex acquisitions and shielded my corporate entities. He knew the entire miserable history of the Aspen cabin. He was the exact person who had facilitated the anonymous purchase 3 years ago, when the IRS had slapped a heavy lien on Leon for years of massive tax evasion. I attached the screenshot and typed a quick, precise message. Leon just sent this. He plans to bring a real estate broker to the property tomorrow morning to initiate a fraudulent sale. The grace period is officially over. Proceed with the immediate eviction protocol. Bring the local authorities. I want them removed from my property by noon. I hit send and tossed the phone onto the massive marble kitchen island. I walked over to the custom climate-controlled wine vault built seamlessly into the stone wall. I selected a rare, full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon, uncorked it with practiced ease, and poured a generous amount into a crystal goblet. I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the rich, dark fruit flavors ground my senses. Less than a minute later, my phone vibrated across the marble. Elias was calling. I picked it up and swiped to answer. "Tell me you are joking," Elias said, his voice a mix of professional disbelief and dark amusement. "He is actually trying to list a foreclosed property that has not been in his name for 36 months. I took another sip of wine, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the swirling, violent blizzard. He is incredibly desperate, Elias. Marcus owes $200,000 to men who break legs for a living. Leon thinks he can pull a fast one, secure a massive cash deposit from some unsuspecting luxury buyer, and bail his golden boy out of trouble. He completely forgot that title searches exist. Or he is just arrogant enough to think he can bypass the law entirely to save his own pride." Elias chuckled, the sound dry and sharp over the receiver. "It is a severe felony to attempt the sale of a property you do not own to defraud a buyer. If he actually signs a listing agreement tomorrow, he is committing a serious financial crime on top of trespassing." "Let him try," I replied, stepping away from the kitchen and walking slowly toward the massive stone fireplace in the center of the room. "I want him to bring the broker. I want him to puff out his chest and play the wealthy, powerful patriarch one last time. I want the illusion to reach its absolute peak before you tear it down." "What time can you be there?" "I am already coordinating with the Pitkin County Sheriff's Office," Elias confirmed, matching my cold energy. "We anticipated they might refuse to leave if they discovered the power shutoff was your doing. I have the certified deed, the original foreclosure records, and the immediate vacate order signed by a local judge. The armed deputies will meet me at the base of the mountain. We will be at the cabin front door at 9 in the morning sharp. Make sure you hand the eviction notice directly to Leon," I instructed, staring into the flames. "And Elastic, do not show them a single ounce of pity. They plan to use me as unpaid domestic labor while they skied and drank champagne. Now they are planning to commit real estate fraud to save a degenerate gambler. Treat them exactly like the hostile squatters they are." "Understood," Elias replied, his tone shifting back to pure legal executioner. "Enjoy your peaceful evening, Naomi. Tomorrow is going to be a very busy and destructive day for your father." I ended the call and set the phone down for the final time that night. I walked over to the plush velvet sofa in front of the roaring fire and sank into the deep cushions. The stark contrast between my current reality and theirs was poetic justice in its purest form. I was wrapped in warmth and absolute security, protected by wealth I had built through relentless hard work, sleepless nights, and razor-sharp business acumen. They were shivering in a dark, freezing cabin, terrified of violent loan sharks and clinging to a fake social status that was about to evaporate into thin air. I thought about Patricia, who had ruthlessly drained my college tuition fund to buy Marcus a luxury car he wrecked 3 months later. I thought about Chelsea, who constantly used her white tears to manipulate my parents into treating me like a second-class citizen in my own community. And I thought about Leon, the booming, hypocritical church elder who preached about integrity on Sundays while dodging the IRS and stealing from his own daughter on Mondays. For 3 years, I had quietly paid the property taxes on that mountain cabin. I had covered the expensive maintenance, the insurance, and the association fees out of my own pocket. I had done it out of some misplaced sense of familial duty, a lingering naive desire to protect them from the ultimate shame of public financial ruin. I had allowed them to pretend they were still the masters of their own destiny. But gratitude is a completely foreign concept to parasites. They had taken my silent protection and used it as a stage to continue their emotional abuse. They viewed my grace as a weakness they could exploit. By threatening to sell the very roof I had secretly kept over their heads, Leon had finally crossed the point of no return. I finished my glass of wine and watched the bright orange flames dance in the hearth. The fire cast long dancing shadows across the high walls of the penthouse. There would be no more saving them. There would be no more secret financial bailouts or silent, heartbreaking sacrifices on my part. I walked into the master suite, slipped under the heavy, heated duvet, and closed my eyes. The winter storm raged violently outside the reinforced glass, but inside my mind, everything was perfectly calm. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, entirely unbothered, knowing with absolute certainty that when the sun rose, the legal guillotine would finally drop. He did not raise his voice or match my father's aggressive posturing. He simply reached into his leather folio and extracted a thick stack of legal documents printed on heavy watermark paper. On top of the stack was a certified property deed stamped with the official seal of Pitkin County. Elias held the document out, extending it directly toward Leon's chest. "Take it," Leon Elias commanded, his tone completely devoid of any respect. "Read the name listed under the current property owner." My father snatched the document from the attorney's hand, his face twisted into a vicious sneer. "You think a fake piece of paper is going to scare me out of my own house?" he spat aggressively, adjusting his glasses to read the fine print. "This is just another one of Naomi's pathetic little stunts. She is trying to forge documents because she is jealous of her brother." But as Leon's eyes scanned the legal text, his arrogant sneer began to violently tremble. The color completely drained from his cheeks, leaving his face a sickly shade of gray. His hands started shaking so violently that the heavy paper rattled in the freezing kitchen air. "What does it say?" Leon Patricia demanded, stepping out from the hallway. Her pristine church lady facade was cracking under the immense pressure of the situation. "Tell this ridiculous lawyer to get out of our cabin!" Leon could not speak. His mouth opened and closed, but absolutely no sound came out. His entire fake empire was crumbling in his hands. "Since you seem to have temporarily lost your voice," Elias said smoothly, stepping into the dead silence, "I will read it for the room. You do not own this property, Leon. You have not owned a single square inch of this estate for exactly 36 months. Patricia gasped, clutching her chest. "That is impossible!" she shrieked. "My husband bought this cabin 10 years ago. It is the crown jewel of our real estate portfolio." "Your husband is a complete fraud," Patricia Elias corrected, brutally, shifting his cold gaze to my mother. 3 years ago, the Internal Revenue Service placed a massive federal tax lien on this property. Leon had been systematically evading his income taxes, hiding money to fund his expensive country club memberships and leased luxury vehicles. When the debt reached catastrophic levels, the federal government stepped in and foreclosed on the estate. The bank seized the cabin. You lost everything. You are completely bankrupt. "Lies," Marcus yelled from behind the kitchen island, his voice cracking with pure panic. "If the bank seized the cabin, why have we been coming here every winter? Why did the lock still work? Why did nobody ever put an eviction notice on the front door?" Elias turned to Marcus, looking at him like he was a particularly slow child. "Because my client stepped in and saved you from absolute homelessness. When this multi-million-dollar estate went up for public auction, Naomi used her own wealth to purchase the deed under an anonymous limited liability company. She paid off your father's massive tax debts in full. She paid the exorbitant property taxes every single year. She covered the massive utility bills out of her own pocket. She maintained the insurance policies. She allowed you to continue visiting this property completely free of charge, so your parents would not have to face the ultimate public humiliation of losing their favorite status symbol in front of their entire congregation. She gave you absolute grace, and you repaid her by treating her like an unpaid domestic servant. The luxury real estate broker, Preston Blake, had heard absolutely enough. He realized instantly that he had almost been roped into a massive criminal conspiracy. He shoved his laser measuring tool deep into his designer coat pocket and practically sprinted toward the front door. "I will show myself out," he announced frantically, completely abandoning the promise of a massive commission. "Good luck with the federal authorities, Leon." The heavy oak door slammed shut behind the fleeing broker, echoing like a gunshot in the freezing room. Leon dropped the certified deed onto the marble kitchen island. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto a bar stool, burying his face in his hands. The booming, commanding patriarch was entirely gone, replaced by a broken, fraudulent man. Patricia began to wail, leaning against the wooden wall for support, as the reality of their sheer poverty washed over her. She realized in an instant that her entire social standing was built on the charity of the daughter she constantly belittled. Marcus gripped the edge of the marble island, his knuckles turning white as the reality of his $200,000 gambling debt crashed down on him. There was no secret family wealth to bail him out. He was entirely on his own, facing men who would not hesitate to destroy his life. Chelsea backed away from him as if he were suddenly radioactive, her mind spinning as she processed that the luxurious lifestyle she had married into was entirely funded by the sister-in-law she had continuously mocked. The lead sheriff stepped forward, resting his hand heavily on his utility belt. He looked down at my shivering, defeated family with absolute zero sympathy. "You heard the attorney," the deputy stated, his voice echoing with undeniable legal authority. "You are currently trespassing on private property owned by a woman you just tried to defraud. My deputies and I are going to stand right here in this kitchen while you pack your bags. You have exactly 2 hours to vacate the premises completely." If a single person is still standing inside this cabin at 11 o'clock this morning, you will all be leaving the mountain in the back of my cruiser in handcuffs. Get moving. The command from the command hung in the freezing air like a physical blow. Get moving. Those 2 words effectively triggered the complete and total implosion of the Sterling family facade. For a few agonizing seconds, nobody moved. The sheer magnitude of the humiliation paralyzed them. Leon stared at the marble countertop, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with the hollow gaze of a completely broken man. The booming, patriarchal authority he had weaponized for decades was dead, completely eradicated by a single piece of paper bearing my name. Patricia let out a guttural, high-pitched wail. She slumped against the wooden cabinets, burying her face in her hands. The pristine church elder, the woman who judged everyone else for their lack of proper status, was now facing the ultimate social execution. She was being evicted by armed police officers from a home she had been illegally squatting in. She tried to reach out to Leon for comfort, but he shoved her hand away, too consumed by his own monumental failure to offer any solace to the woman who had enabled his financial delusions. But the true destruction was happening right behind the kitchen island. Chelsea stood perfectly still, her eyes darting between Elias, the sheriff, and her husband. The manufactured tears she relied on to manipulate situations were completely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating horror. She looked at Marcus, the man she married because she thought he was a rising star in the financial sector, with a wealthy real estate tycoon father to fall back on. The math was finally adding up in her head, and the total equaled absolute zero. "You are broke," Chelsea said, her voice dropping to a terrifying deadpan whisper that cut through Patricia and her dramatic sobbing. Marcus flinched, stepping toward her with his hands raised pleadingly. "Chelsea, baby, please listen to me," he begged. "We can fix this. I just need a little time to move some investments around. The market is just volatile right now. I can make it right. Chelsea let out a loud, hysterical laugh. Investments! She screamed the sound, vibrating against the frozen timber ceilings. What investments, Marcus? You owe $200,000 to violent loan sharks. Your credit cards are maxed out. We have overdue notices piling up at our apartment. You brought me to a freezing cabin in the middle of a blizzard and promised me we were going to sell it today to save our lifestyle. And now I find out your father has not owned this place in 3 years. You are not a finance executive. You are a broke, pathetic fraud, living off the charity of the sister you treat like a servant. Keep your voice down, Patricia hissed, stepping forward with panicked urgency. The deputies are right there. Do not air our family business in front of the authorities. We can resolve this privately, like respectable people. Respectable people! Chelsea shrieked, turning her wrath onto my mother. Are you completely out of your mind, Patricia? There is absolutely nothing respectable about you. You parade around your church in designer hats, acting better than everyone else while the IRS seizes your properties. You drained Naomi and her college fund to buy this loser a car. You enabled a gambling addict and lied to my face for years about your family wealth. You are all a bunch of fake, desperate scammers. Patricia physically recoiled as if she had been slapped. She watched the daughter-in-law she had catered to for years, the woman she had prioritized over her own flesh and blood, completely turn on them. Patricia had cooked for Chelsea, cleaned for Chelsea, and drained her own finances to keep Chelsea happy, hoping to secure her proximity to elevated social status. Now that same woman was looking at Patricia like she was toxic waste. Leon stood up, his face flushing a dangerous dark purple. Do not you dare speak to my wife that way, you entitled little girl, he roared, attempting to summon a shred of his former dominance. Chelsea did not even blink. Shut up, Leon, she spat, her voice dripping with pure disgust. You are currently being evicted by the police. You have zero authority over me or anyone else. You are a bankrupt criminal. Marcus grabbed her arm, his eyes wild with terror. Chelsea, please, do not do this. I love you. We have the kids. We can start over. I promise I will change. Chelsea violently yanked her arm out of his grasp. She looked at the man she had proudly flaunted at country club dinners. The golden child who could do no wrong. She saw him for exactly what he was. A terrified, destitute man about to be hunted by men who break legs for unpaid debts. She was a woman who survived on status and privilege, and Marcus had just become a massive liability. There is no we, Marcus, she stated, her tone turning to absolute ice. I am not going down with this sinking ship. I am not raising my children in a motel while you run from violent criminals. You lied to me about your career. You lied to me about your family money. You are absolutely nothing. With a swift, vicious motion, Chelsea grabbed her left hand. She gripped the massive diamond engagement ring and the matching wedding band, the very rings Patricia had taken a second mortgage to help Marcus purchase. She yanked them off her finger. The metal scraped against her skin in the freezing air. She threw the rings directly at Marcus. They hit him squarely in the chest and bounced off, falling onto the frozen hardwood floor with a sharp, metallic clatter. We are done, Chelsea declared. She pulled her phone from her designer coat pocket and immediately dialed a number. The entire room watched as she pressed the phone to her ear. Mom, she cried, shifting her tone instantly from vicious rage to the desperate, innocent victim. Mom, I need you to send a car to Aspen right now. No, Marcus lied to me. His family is completely bankrupt and the police are here kicking them out. I am stranded on a mountain with the babies and it is freezing. Please get me out of here. Marcus fell to his knees on the hardwood floor. He ignored the police officers. He ignored his weeping mother and his paralyzed father. He frantically scrambled on his hands and knees searching for the discarded diamond rings. He grabbed them, clutching the cold metal in his fist, his entire body shaking with violent sobs. The golden child was completely broken. He realized the full gravity of his isolation. The loan sharks did not care about apologies. They cared about cash, and Marcus had none. He had spent his life believing he was untouchable simply because his parents told him he was a king. Now he was a king of absolutely nothing, kneeling in the dust, clutching a piece of jewelry that was likely heavily financed and entirely worthless compared to his staggering debts. The sheriff checked his watch, his expression unyielding. "You have 1 hour and 40 minutes left," the deputy announced loudly. "I suggest you stop arguing and start packing your bags." Chelsea shoved past Marcus, completely ignoring his sobbing form on the floor. She grabbed her diaper bag and began throwing items into it, moving with frantic, selfish energy. Patricia slumped against Leon, both of them staring blankly at the walls of the cabin they once proudly claimed as their own. The empire was gone. The respectability was dead. They had nothing left but the clothes on their backs and the cold, harsh reality of the blizzard waiting for them outside. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind them with a final, definitive thud that echoed into the howling wind. Patricia and Leon stood on the frozen porch, clutching their overpriced designer luggage. The Colorado blizzard showed absolutely zero mercy. The wind ripped through Patricia's cashmere coat, instantly chilling her to the bone. Leon struggled to drag his heavy leather suitcase through the thick snow, accumulating on the steps. The deputies remained stationed inside the warm cabin, ensuring the eviction was completely enforced, while the former patriarch and matriarch were banished to the harsh elements. They stumbled down the icy driveway, their expensive boots slipping on the frozen pavement. They had no car. Chelsea had taken the leased SUV. Marcus had vanished into the woods, walking toward the highway in a desperate attempt to escape his own demons. My parents were completely alone, stranded in the harsh winter storm with absolutely nowhere to go. A pair of piercing LED headlights cut through the blinding white snowstorm. A massive, custom black Cadillac Escalade, equipped with heavy-duty winter treads, smoothly navigated the steep, winding driveway. The luxury vehicle purred with quiet power, parting the snow effortlessly as it glided toward the cabin. Patricia and Leon shielded their faces from the blinding high beams. The SUV came to a smooth halt, precisely 10 feet away from where my parents were shivering in the snowbanks. The tinted windows obscured the interior, but Patricia recognized the sheer level of wealth the vehicle represented. She instinctively straightened her posture, desperately trying to salvage a microscopic shred of her ruined dignity. The driver, a tall man, wearing a crisp black suit and insulated leather gloves, stepped out into the blizzard. He walked around the front of the vehicle and opened the rear passenger door. The warm, ambient glow of the plush interior spilled out onto the snow. I did not step out into the freezing storm. I remained comfortably seated in the heated rear captain chair, draped in a thick camel hair coat, holding a fresh cup of artisan coffee. I looked down at the two people who had spent my entire life making me feel completely invisible. Patricia stared at me through the open door, her eyes widening in absolute horror and desperate recognition. The reality of the power dynamic finally crushed her. She let go of her designer suitcase, letting it topple into a snowdrift. Her legs gave out completely. The proud church elder, the woman who constantly judged everyone in our Atlanta congregation, dropped directly to her knees in the freezing, wet snow. "Naomi, please!" Patricia wailed, her voice cracking under the brutal wind. Her perfectly styled hair was plastered to her face, in wet, freezing strands. She crawled forward on her knees, ignoring the biting cold soaking through her expensive slacks. "You cannot leave us out here. We will freeze to death. We have absolutely nothing left." Chelsea took the car. "Marcus is gone. We are your parents. Please have mercy on us." Leon collapsed right beside her, dropping to his knees with a heavy, defeated thud. The man who had roared commands at me just 24 hours ago was now weeping openly. His broad shoulders shook violently. "Naomi, I am begging you," Leon cried, holding his hands up in a posture of total surrender. "I was wrong. I was a foolish, arrogant man. Please, let us back into the cabin just for one night. We will sleep on the floor. We will clean the kitchen. Just do not leave us out here to die." I took a slow sip of my hot coffee, letting the steam warm my face. "It is fascinating how quickly your immense pride evaporates when you are no longer spending my money, Leon," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the open car door. "Just yesterday, you were threatening to sell my property to save your golden boy. Now you are offering to mop my floors." Patricia crawled closer, clutching her hands together in frantic prayer. "Think of our reputation, Naomi," she sobbed, playing the only card she had left. "If the people at our church find out we were evicted into the snow by our own daughter, we will be completely ruined. The entire congregation will shun us. Pastor Williams will strip your father of his elder title. We will be laughingstocks. You know how important our community standing is. You cannot destroy our legacy like this." I looked at my mother, feeling an overwhelming sense of profound disgust. Even now, kneeling in the snow with zero assets to her name, her primary concern was the opinions of hypocrites at her church. She cared more about her fake image than the daughter sitting right in front of her. "You destroyed your own legacy, Patricia," I replied, my tone completely devoid of warmth. "You built your entire life on a foundation of massive financial fraud and emotional abuse. You sacrificed my well-being to fund Marcus and his fake lifestyle. You stole my college tuition. You manipulated me. You invited me on this trip solely to use me as an unpaid domestic servant. The church congregation is going to find out the truth because you cannot hide bankruptcy. But that is your cross to bear, not mine. Please," Naomi, Leon wept, his teeth chattering violently. "We are broke. We have no retirement accounts left. The IRS took everything. We have nowhere to go. We are homeless." "You have been homeless for 3 years, Leon," I corrected him sharply. "You refused to accept it because I silently paid the bills to keep a roof over your head. I protected you, and you repaid my grace with sheer hostility. You wielded power you did not possess. I am simply removing the safety net you took for granted." The wind continued to howl, tearing through the trees. They remained kneeling in the freezing snow broken, while I sat perfectly warm, holding the power they had just foolishly discarded. I watched Patricia drag her freezing knees across the fresh powder. She reached out with bare, trembling hands, placing her palms flat against the chrome running board of my luxury vehicle. The sheer desperation in her eyes was something I had never witnessed before. This was the woman who had spent my entire life judging my worth based on my relationship status and my bank account. She had worshipped at the altar of respectability, demanding that I shrink myself so her golden sun could shine. Now her expensive silk wrap was soaked, her makeup was running in dark streaks down her cheeks, and she was literally begging the daughter she despised for a scrap of mercy. Leon remained frozen just a few feet away from her. The man who had roared commands at me, demanding my absolute obedience, was completely hollowed out. His chest heaved with heavy, erratic breaths. He stared at the massive tires of my vehicle, realizing that his entire legacy was buried under the Colorado snow. He had no property, no money, no authority, and absolutely no future. The fake financial empire he had lorded over us was completely eradicated. He had tried to sell a house he did not own to save a son who was a fraud, and now he was facing the brutal reality of his own actions. I did not feel a single drop of pity. Pity is a luxury reserved for those who simply make mistakes. What my parents had done to me was not a mistake. It was a calculated, systematic campaign of emotional and financial abuse spanning over 3 decades. They had intentionally tried to drain my resources to fund their illusions. They had used my silence as a weapon against me. I reached into the leather storage compartment beside my heated seat, My fingers brushed against a thick, heavy envelope made of premium cream cardstock. I had instructed Elias to prepare this specific document the moment Leon sent that text message threatening to sell my house. I picked up the envelope, feeling its heavy weight in my hand. It was the final nail in the coffin of their entitlement. It was the culmination of every single time they had taken advantage of my grace. I pressed the metallic button on my armrest. The tinted window of the SUV began to slide down with a smooth, mechanical hum. The instant the glass lowered, a violent blast of freezing mountain air rushed into the heated cabin of the vehicle. The bitter cold bit at my cheeks, but I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact with my mother. Patricia let out a ragged gasp of hope the second she saw my face clearly. She grabbed the edge of the open window frame, her knuckles turning white from the freezing temperature. "Naomi," she wept, her voice raw and grating against the howling wind. "Oh, thank God! Thank God you are listening to reason. Please open the door. Let us inside the car. We can go back to the hotel and talk about this like a real family. We can fix everything. I promise I will make it right. We will go to church together and pray on this. We can protect the family name." I looked down at her freezing, trembling hands, gripping my car window. "You cannot fix what was never real, Patricia," I said, my voice slicing through the winter storm with absolute surgical precision. "You built a fantasy and expected me to fund it. You chose your vanity over my well-being every single day of my life. You are only crying right now because you got caught and because you are cold." I lifted the heavy cream envelope and held it out the window. Patricia instinctively reached for it, her eyes wide with a sudden, desperate hunger. She likely thought it was a check. She probably believed I was giving her a quiet bailout, handing her enough cash to flee the mountain and secure a hotel room to save her precious dignity. Her greedy fingers snatched the envelope from my hand. "Open it," I commanded. Patricia fumbled with the seal, her freezing fingers struggling to tear the paper. Leon dragged himself up from the snowbank, stumbling forward to look over her shoulder. His eyes darted frantically, searching for a lifeline. Patricia finally ripped the envelope open and pulled out the thick stack of legal documents inside. The header of the top page was emblazoned with the logo of my asset management firm and the contact information of my ruthless legal team. "What is this?" Patricia whispered, her eyes scanning the itemized columns of numbers printed on the crisp white paper. I leaned slightly toward the open window, ensuring my voice carried over the screaming wind. "That is your reality check," I stated coldly. "Here is the itemized bill for 3 years of back rent and property damage. You have been living in my house rent-free while treating me like dirt. You owe me for the property taxes I paid to keep you out of federal prison. You owe me for the utility bills you racked up. You owe me for the emergency locksmith and the deep cleaning fees required to scrub your presence from my property. I have accounted for every single day you squatted in my cabin." Leon let out a choked gasp, staring at the final total printed at the bottom of the page. The number was astronomical. It was a financial death sentence for 2 people who had absolutely zero income and zero assets to their name. "Have it paid by the 1st, or my legal team will sue you for everything you have left," I said, delivering the final, crushing blow without a single ounce of hesitation. "We will garnish your Social Security. We will take whatever miserable scraps you have hidden away. You wanted to play the wealthy landlords. Now you get to pay the landlord." Patricia stared at the paper, her mind completely snapping under the weight of her absolute ruin. She looked up at me, her mouth opening in a silent scream of pure terror. She realized there was no escape. I had legally documented every single penny they owed me. I had weaponized their own greed and turned it into an inescapable trap. They were destitute, and they were entirely to blame. "Merry Christmas," I said, perfectly calm. I pressed the button on my armrest. The tinted glass began to rise smoothly. Patricia shrieked, slamming her hands against the window, but the heavy soundproof glass sealed shut completely, cutting off her frantic cries. The sudden silence inside the luxury cabin of the SUV was deafening and beautiful. It was the sound of absolute freedom. I picked up my crystal glass of wine from the center console. I took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring the rich flavor as it warmed my throat. I looked at my driver through the rearview mirror. "Take me to the airport," I instructed quietly. "I have a flight to catch." "Yes, ma'am," the driver replied, shifting the massive vehicle into gear. The SUV began to roll forward, navigating the snowy driveway with effortless power. I turned my head to look out the window one last time. Through the dark, tinted glass, I watched Patricia and Leon shrinking into the distance. They were standing knee-deep in the freezing snow, clutching a bill they could never pay, completely destroyed by their own toxic greed. The blizzard swirled around them, burying their fake legacy under a mountain of ice. I leaned back into the heated leather seat and closed my eyes. The heavy burden of being the family scapegoat was gone forever. I was finally in total control of my own life, and the future belonged entirely to me. The story of Naomi teaches us a profound lesson about the true meaning of family boundaries and the silent power of self-worth. For years, she was forced to play the role of the invisible scapegoat, while her parents blindly worshipped a golden child who offered them nothing but a fabricated reality. They mistook her quiet grace for weakness and weaponized her unmarried status to treat her like unpaid labor. But Naomi proved that true success does not require an audience or a loud announcement. She built her empire in the shadows, ensuring her financial independence so that when the time came, she would never have to shrink herself to fit into their toxic narrative. This journey highlights the painful but necessary truth that sharing blood does not automatically grant someone unlimited access to your peace. When family members demand respect while continuously disrespecting your boundaries, stepping away is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of absolute survival. The golden child illusion will always crumble under the weight of reality, leaving enablers to face the devastating consequences of their own enabling behavior. Naomi did not seek petty revenge. She simply removed the safety net her family had taken for granted, allowing their own entitlement to orchestrate their ultimate downfall. She taught us that holding on to your peace is far more valuable than holding on to toxic traditions. Have you ever had to establish firm boundaries with relatives who underestimated your worth and tried to take advantage of your success? How did you find the courage to finally walk away and choose your own peace over their expectations? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story of reclaiming your power resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more empowering journeys of self-discovery.